we're really lucky to have the team from Chicago CRED with us. It's a nonprofit for proactively reducing gun violence in Chicago through community organizing, relationship building, and investment rather than relying on law enforcement. It's a really incredible organization, and I'm going to turn it over to Nicole Taylor to lead our discussion. Nicole is the president and CEO of Silicon Valley Community Foundation. And joining us on stage, the team from Chicago CRED, we have Billy Moore, who is a site manager, Anthony Calhoun, an alumni ambassador, William Brown, a life coach, and Arne Duncan, the founder and managing partner. So we're really thrilled to have all of them here. And so here to talk about the organization, its work reducing gun violence in Chicago, as well as taking that work to scale. Please welcome our panel.
Arne will be joining us in a minute. So good afternoon, everybody. I'm really excited about this conversation. We're taking a little bit of a different approach and conversation than you've just been hearing. I'm going to just jump right in and have Billy Moore kick us off. Because what I would like to do is hear from all of these gentlemen and hear why they're part of Chicago CRED. But in order to do that, we got to hear a little bit about who they are and their life story. So we're going to kick it off with Billy.
Thank you. My name is Billy Moore. I'm from Chicago, born and raised. I work for Chicago CRED. I am a site manager at one of our three
Billy,
West
hold it a
Side.
little closer.
Oh, I'm sorry.
There we go.
Can you guys hear me?
There,
okay,
that's better.
Good job. So I work for Chicago CRED. I'm a site manager at one of our three West Side hubs. I started working with Chicago CRED in 2020, but I first started working for an organization that was funded by Chicago CRED, Iman, the Inner City Muslim Action Network, as our lead life coach. Coming into this work, it's my passion to work with young men who are at risk of being involved in gun violence. Because me, growing up in the city of Chicago on the South Side, I was involved in gun violence, unfortunately, as a young man. At 16 years old, I had an unfortunate incident which led me to prison. I unfortunately had shot a young man that was 17 years old. He ended up dying. He happened to be, at that time, the #1 basketball player in high school, Ben Wilson. It was a highly sensationalized case. It was talked about all through the media. I ended up doing 20 years in prison. I came home in 2004. I was 36 years old. I was able to get some support from an organization that helped returning citizens called the Safer Foundation. Going through that program, I found myself into a mentoring program where I was sitting with young guys who had just came home from prison, trying to find some support and help, and they rolled back transitioning into society. So I wasn't really saying nothing in the mentoring program. But then I started hearing these young guys and the issues that they were going through, so I started speaking. And I kind of like became an unofficial mentor to these young guys. So my case manager asked me to speak at their graduation, and I wasn't even graduating. And I'm like, I'm not doing no talking. I don't do no talking. And she like, no, you gonna speak. You got a lot to say. So I was the last person on the agenda, and I had wrote out this speech. I was super nervous. I really didn't know what to say, right? So by the time they got to me on the agenda, I decided to tear my speech up. I said I was just gonna tell my story. I was gonna talk from my heart, right? Talk about how I found myself involved in gangs when my father had died 15 months before I ended up going to prison of cancer. That was someone who I lost in my life who gave me guidance. And I understand that these young men, they just don't have a lot of guidance. So they gravitate to the closest thing that they find guidance in. And usually it's the guys on the block. And right now we're dealing with so many young men who find themselves in groups that are peer-led. They don't have a lot of older guys who they can look up to as mentors. So as I went through the program and I started mentoring these guys, I became a success story for the Safer Foundation, and they helped me get my first job. I was driving a truck. They helped me get my housing, everything that I was doing that helped them be a success in terms of hitting their benchmarks, I was able to accomplish. So the lady who basically was over the day-to-day operation, the Safer Foundation decided to give me a chance and gave me a job as a job coach. So I started working with returning citizens, and I worked that job for 12 years. I ended up becoming a site manager for the Safer Foundation until we lost our funding. Fast forward to 2017, I had a son. My son, he had kind of fell by the wayside because when I was in prison, I wasn't there to help him. He ended up going to prison. My son did 6 years in prison. When my son came home from prison, my son unfortunately became a victim of gun violence. He was shot 16 times in the car, and he lost his life. So gun violence to me became full circle. I understood the grief that I had inflicted on the family, and now I fully understood the grief because it was my pain. In my heart, I initially, dealt with the grief and the loss, but the first thing came to my mind when I found out that he was dead was to extend forgiveness to the young men who had did this. Not knowing who it was at the time, them never seeking forgiveness, but I understood as a 16-year-old kid the type of hatred that people showed towards me. They wanted to see the worst happen to me because of what I had done. And I just understood that the young man who had killed my son was caught up in the same ignorance or that cycle of ignorance that I was caught up in. So I had no choice but to forgive them in my heart, because I didn't want to see nothing as a retaliatory, get back. That's kind of like what happens in Chicago when someone kills somebody, they go and kill the other person. I didn't want to see that, right? I happened to get my job at Iman literally 5 days later. I was called and offered a job, and I was asked could I start my first day of the training, and I couldn't do it because it was the day of my son's funeral. The person who ran the program told me if I needed to take some time off to start my job, it was fine. And I told him, no, just give me that day and I'll be there Monday. Because I knew I was gonna be working with young men who was just like my son, who had lost his life, and definitely the young man who was responsible for taking my son's life. So I started my career in violence intervention. About a month later, I got a chance to meet Arne Duncan, and because of his support from Chicago CRED, they expanded the Green Reentry Program. That's how I got my job. What a lot of people didn't know at the time is that the person who I went to prison for killing was a close friend of Arne Duncan's when they grew up playing basketball together. So we walked on this peace march, and he asked me to tell him my story because he wanted to hear from me personally. So we walked through a neighborhood that I grew up in, a neighborhood that Arne played basketball in. And at the end of that conversation, we exchanged numbers. And I've been working for Arne ever since, doing this work. So this is pretty much what we're trying to do in Chicago. We're trying to reach these young men who basically don't know how to have that social and emotional intelligence to resolve conflict without it leading to gun violence. And we try to help these young men pretty much outthink their feelings. Because a lot of times they respond to the moment, and unfortunately it leads to somebody losing their life. So that's pretty much what I do at Chicago CRED. That's a little bit of my story. It's a lot, but I'm gonna let Anthony, tell his story.
Yeah. All right, Anthony.
How everybody doing today?
Hold it real close.
How everybody doing today? My name Anthony. I'm from Chicago, West Side. Grew up in the North Lawndale community. And growing up in the North Lawndale community wasn't easy for me. It was kind of hard because a lot of people still to this day ain't make it to see my age. A lot of my friends caught up into gun violence and stuff. I was arrested. I came home and got introduced to Chicago CRED. And throughout my journey throughout Chicago CRED, it was like kind of hard because I was still, my first year was like I was still in between in the streets and stuff. I caught gun cases and stuff before I got involved with CRED though. So it just, it led me to prison.
So I know when we were talking earlier, you said that even when you were in prison, so you'd started with CRED, then you got a case caught up to you, right?
Yes.
From earlier in your life. And even while you were in prison, CRED didn't let you down.
Yeah.
What'd they do?
They answered every call. They sent me books to read. I just feel like they treated me like I was a son to them, or just like a little brother. And
So when you got out of prison, what'd you do?
I got out, I re-engaged with Chicago CRED. I obtained my high school diploma. I started my associate's degree for business, and also now I work with participants throughout the program, helping them with education, facilitating groups. One of the groups called CBI, Cognitive Behavioral Intervention. It's like learning your feelings and emotions, because those two things cause a lot of stuff that's happening. So that's my story.
Okay, William, but I call him Juju.
How everybody doing? I'm William Brown. Everybody call me Juju, so y'all can call me Juju when y'all answer y'all question. I'm also Lil Billy, Lil Ant, but I grew up on the south side of Chicago, Inglewood, low end, Bronzeville, and part of Inglewood, 68th and Horn, 68th and Damon. It was hard for me growing up. You know, I grew up in a one-parent household with just my mama, raising me and my two brothers, typical south side story, so to say. It was tough. You know how it is, you know. One parent, she making all the decisions, she get to do this and that. I don't really have nobody to answer to. She at work all the time, basically, and what else I'm gonna do when she at work? I'm gonna roam the streets, right? So while I was growing up, you know, I was getting into a lot of stuff, you know, being able to, like, be on my own a lot. Like, she was at work trying to do what she do to keep food on the table or whatever. And I ain't really had nobody to look to, no really positive role models to look to while I was growing up. So eventually I end up picking up to the street vibes, getting deep into it, and I end up catching some juvenile cases while I was a teenager, in and out of jail while I was a teenager. Then I got arrested for attempted murder when I was a teenager, when I turned 17. So I ended up doing 9 years in jail for that. So when I got out, I became involved in a program that's similar to CRED. It was called Ready Chicago. I caught some cases while I was in that program, so to speak, and I was still like threading the needle back and forth, in and out of violence and stuff. And currently the lead life coach at the site where I work at now, at Billy's site, he ended up getting me into CRED. He was in Ready at first, that was my outreach worker, and he ended up getting me into CRED in the long run, and he ended up finding out about, like, you know, the stuff I was still into, and he was kind of a little disappointed. So that kind of hit me off back right there. Like, by him, like, looking at me some type of way, because he like, man, I thought I just showed you this. So, you know, he giving me the rundown of the program. You know, I'm hitting him like, man, hey, how's you working at this program? And I don't know nothing about it. I know I fit the criteria for any reduced gun violence program. So I hit him with that. We took off from there, and I quickly assumed roles when I was a participant in CRED, like as the peer coach, junior life coach. I became like the leader of the group that we was currently in when I was a participant. And I ended up going to our ENT site. It's called Employment and Training, where they get us into like different workshops or send us to school, or you basically can pick whatever you want to do, and, you know, CRED pay for it or whatever. So I ended up taking that and just going crazy with that. I ended up getting my OSHA 10 card. I ended up getting a lot of certificates, my CPI certificate, and I graduated from the construction program. Oh yeah, I wrote a book too. It's called Construction of the Elevated Man. I wrote that through CRED too. I received my associate's degree also through CRED. And so I like to call myself, like Billy said, like sort of like the success story of Chicago CRED, because now I'm one of their newest life coaches too also. And a lot of the guys, they like to call me their hero in the program, because I basically was recently just going through a lot of the stuff they went through. So they get to see now I'm on the other side. I was just a participant with y'all a few months ago, and now look at me now. I'm a life coach, and now I'm helping them get to where they need to be. I'm giving them job referrals, helping them fill out job applications and doing that. So that's just like, now I'm on the other end, and it just feel good.
That's great. And before we get to Arne, you just finished something, maybe bachelor's degree?
Oh, yes. So, yeah, I recently got my bachelor's degree from Southern New Hampshire University.
Yes.
You know, I got to thank Arne for that, because the opportunity that came to me, well, actually, sad story, I was in the financial aid department signing up for school when I found out my son had got shot and killed. So I decided not to go. Couldn't get my head in the game. Arne introduced me to the Southern New Hampshire president at the time, Paul LeBlanc, and their board, and they offered us the opportunity to go to school. And I felt like I couldn't pass up on that opportunity, because I wanted these young men to know that education could open up doors. And I couldn't tell that message if I wasn't a person who, you know, was an example of that message. So I was able to get my degree. So I have my bachelor's degree.
That's great.
It feels good.
It's great. So the life coaching is a big piece of it, right? And education, so everything from your high school diploma to associate's degree and bachelor's, which is fantastic. We also talked about over lunch that you have jobs, that CRED is providing jobs and providing money to folks and the participants, right? What else am I missing? What are the other key ingredients of why CRED? Why is it working? Why did it work for you, little ant? Why did it work for you, Anthony?
I feel like Chicago CRED worked out for me because they helped me find myself. Because at a point, I was lost. Like, I didn't really know what I wanted or what I wanted to do. So just being involved with CRED showed me, like, dang, I could really help my community instead of messing it up. So ever since then, I've been just trying to help the youth, older, however I can.
That's great. Gigi, what about you?
What made me stay with CRED, it was the connections I built. I say that all the time. Like, I never met nobody that was as real as Billy, as real as Ant, as real as Javon, as real as Brittany, as real as Arne. I can go on, as real as Princess. I can go on forever. And this coming from me as a participant before I started working. So that just kept me coming every day. Like, if it's certain days, because everybody know I have my son. Like, I'm always with my son. That's my mini-me. That's my twin. Keep him with me 24/7. So it'll be days when all right, my girl got to work, so I got to have my son today. And then Billy, bring him in with you. What you doing? He come in, he come tear the office up. They done watch my son go from, he 4 now, they done watched him up since when he couldn't talk. That's when he met them. So that's how long it go back. And just like them just looking out for my son, babysitting them, and just the little stuff, just holding on, and just like knowing like, all right, man, we ain't letting you go back to what you was just going through, and we ain't finna keep letting you do that. And so when I started to look at that, like, dang, we really a family. I got a family, and I be telling Billy all the time, I don't really like when he called me his little brother. As I tell him, I look at him like a father. You feel me? So, and that's just my thing. It's like, man, I ain't never met this type of group of guys. Like, I tell him my business or I say something to him, it never go past those walls in CRED. I done broke down and been on the phone with Arne for hours. He got a busy schedule, but I bet they never come back to me. Billy don't know what we talk about, nobody in the program. The same thing with him. And it just was like, when that kept happening, and I know I got somebody to come to and somebody to comfort, and that's coming from me on the participant side. And that's what just kept me and wanted to be there every day. Like, I didn't want to miss a day. I wanted to be in all groups. I wanted to facilitate groups. I just wanted to do everything that CRED had going on.
That's great. What keeps you at it, Billy? What keeps you at this?
It's these young men who I know that I'm standing in the gap for. You know, like I said, my son isn't here, and I had to go away for 20 years, and I just can't keep seeing a lot of young men dying in the streets of Chicago and spending a substantial amount of their time in prison without me trying to help, without me trying to figure out a way to give them some type of guidance to know that, you know, this moment may be what it is, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be like that the next moment. Just give yourself a chance.
Right, right. So this is highly personal, highly relational work. And I know that you all want to get to other communities within Chicago, right? So Arne, how do you scale something that's this one-on-one, this relational, this personal for every single participant? How do you scale that?
I know there are a lot of smart tech people in this room. If you have a tech solution, I would love to hear it. We haven't figured it out yet. But Nicole, you're exactly right. It's all relationship-based. Relationships change lives. And so that is, that's the joy of our work. That's the absolute joy of seeing that transformation every day. And it's also the heartbreak when we lose participants. And this is, I always say, the most heartbreaking work I've ever done, but it's also the most inspiring. So there are two barriers to scale. One is always talent, and I worry about that not at all, because you can see we're basically producing our own talent. There's a talent pipeline coming through our participants. So many of our outreach workers, many of our life coaches, other folks, job coaches, are former participants. And so I feel fantastic. And these guys, Anthony and Juju, are extraordinary, but they are not unique. There are many, many, many others like them, and we just have to keep creating those opportunities for them. So the talent part I don't worry about. The funding, the financial piece is important. And what we try and do is create what we call a base team around every participant. There are 5 individuals: their outreach worker, their clinician, their job coach, their life coach, and their tutor, their education tutor. And if you think about a piece of 5 salaries for a year, and we pay the participants a stipend for that year, and then we spin them off the legal economy. But for that year, it's about $25,000 roughly per individual. So it's not cheap, but it's for 1 year. And then they're able to, year to 18 months, whatever, then they're able to fly. So not to give too much data, but there are 15 neighborhoods in Chicago, South and West Sides, that produced 80% of the violence. We're in 1 on the West Side, North Lawndale, 3 on the South Side. Over the past 2 years, Chicago's violence is down about 15%. Our neighborhoods are down 33%. So our neighborhoods, which are some of the most violent in Chicago, are getting safer twice as fast as the rest of the city, and actually driving down the city's numbers. So I will never say what we do is the answer. It is a piece of the answer. But we have to get to scale to get to these other neighborhoods. So we're working actively with the private sector, with the public sector. Our goal is to raise another $200 million, not for CRED, but for all of our partners. If we can do 100 private sector, 100 public sector, then we can scale. Chicago is 6 times more violent than New York. We're 3 to 4 times more violent than LA. What the stress and the trauma these guys grow up with is unbelievable. Just to come out here and just be able to walk down the water and not have to look over their back and be hyper vigilant, it's a game changer. It's just a totally different situation. And so our goal over the next 5 years is an 80% reduction in violence, which would take us down to New York and LA. And to do that, it's going to be about $200 million.
$200 million. So who's involved in all of that? You said you have the public sector, private sector. Can you get a little more specific about what it's going to take?
So the private sector, philanthropy has been funding this. We are generously funded through CRED, through Emerson Collective. Many other national and local nonprofits, philanthropies have been very, very generous to this movement, not just to us. And so that's critical. I always say that public safety is a public good, and ultimately the public has to invest in this. To give you sort of a crazy stat, a couple stats, the city spends $2 billion a year on police in Chicago. In our neighborhoods, if you commit homicide, there's a 9 to 11% chance that you get arrested. So you have an 89 to 91% chance of getting away literally with murder. And if you just shoot someone, that never gets solved. So police ineffectiveness is a huge driver of violence. But $2 billion there in the past couple years for violence prevention or intervention, our work, the city has actually spent more than twice as much on police misconduct settlements each year than they have on violence prevention. So we're not looking to take anything from the police. We just want a little bit of investment in the Jujus, in the Anthonys, in the next generation coming up to give them an off-ramp from this life of violence and give them a chance to be the true leaders and the productive citizens and the role models that our young men and women desperately need.
Right. And you're getting asked, I know, because I ask you all the time, are you going to be in other cities? You know, because Chicago has, like you said, this incredible statistics. There are other parts of this country that could use a CRED. And, you know, so, you know, how are you spreading the word about what it takes?
We're all learning together, and we don't have a manual. I promise you we make a lot of mistakes every single day, and we learn by doing. We're constantly trying to get better. We've been at this for 7.5 years now, which is a little crazy. So we are further ahead than some other cities. So we're working closely with DC. There's a group called DC Peace Now that I'm on the board of trying to help them. There's a group called Memphis Allies. We were recently in Memphis. Billy and I and a couple of folks went to Barbados. A team from Barbados came to visit us in Chicago. And they may learn some things from us, but I know we learn a lot from them. And violence is uniquely bad in Chicago, but it is not unique to Chicago. And many, many urban areas are struggling with this. So we're all trying to learn together, build a learning community. And if they can leapfrog some of our mistakes, if we can learn from things they're doing well, we're all in this together, and we just have to get to a safer place.
Right. So we have this crowd here. What do you want them to leave knowing? So who wants to start? Billy, you want to start?
I think when we consider, you know, the circumstances that young men are facing in Chicago, if we don't invest in them, they're going to always be looked at as being social liabilities. So you have to invest in these young men. You have to make sure that they have something to really look forward to in terms of what they need to pass on to their children. Because majority of the young men that's in our program are young fathers, great fathers, but we don't want them being able to pass down the same type of hand that they've been dealt with to their kids, and now we still have this cycle. So we definitely have to invest economically in these young men, the communities that they come up in, so they don't continue to be looked at and judged as social liabilities.
Anthony? What do you want them to walk away with? What kind of nugget do you want to leave the audience? About the work, about your experience, anything? Okay, we'll go to Juju first.
I would want you to walk away with knowing, like, don't believe everything you see, like, on the news or that's televised, because it's a lot of us that's working, and we trying. And some of us can't get over that hump. We just need that extra push. Like, it ain't easy, and I ain't blaming nobody for my mistakes, or neither is a lot of my guys, because we actually teach them that, to own up and blame yourself, and then that's the only way you're going to get past it. So I just want you to walk away with that. Like, man, just all we need is somebody to believe and see us for who we are. Know we trying to get there, and it's many more like me and Ant.
Thank you. You have something? Anything? You have a new role, right? You have a new role at CRED, right?
Yes.
What is that?
Alumni ambassador.
Okay. So what does that mean? What do you do?
I help out the office flow, keep the office flow down in the program, making sure the participants in the groups they need to be in, facilitate the groups. It ain't easy working with the participants though, because they younger than me, even though I ain't that old. But man, it gets tough. But
He's the same age as my son. When I found that out, I was like,
yeah. Yeah, I am the same age as the participants, but I just want y'all to take from this that we trying, and yeah.
You're trying. I think you're doing, Anthony. I think you're doing. Okay, Arne.
So many lessons. I have
Right.
to do more than one.
Good.
I
It's okay.
learned so much every day. Couple things. Well, first of all, it's just for folks to understand that redemption is absolutely possible. And if all of us are judged by the worst moment in our life, many of us wouldn't be in this room. I certainly wouldn't be in this room. And to see the totality of who people are and what they represent, none of us can take back yesterday, but I try and look at what everybody is doing today and tomorrow and where they're going and really understanding that, and to see that transformation is extraordinary. Secondly, people often say it's great you're giving people a second chance. I reject that in the vast majority of cases. I actually think it's a first chance. I think for the vast majority of our guys, sort of every structure, every institution in their life, their families, the schools, the nonprofits, let them down, failed them, and they made a rational choice to go into the streets because they had to make some money. I always ask guys, how'd you get caught up? The earliest told me at 9 years old he had to start making money. At 9, that was his reality. If you have to make money at 9, there's only one person hiring. That's the guy in the street. So understanding second chances are great, but first chances at whatever age are really important. Third, that I think all the pillars of our work are important, but I would say nothing's more important than helping people heal from trauma. There's a saying that hurt people, but people who are healing can heal themselves and heal the community, and the amount of loss and just not that. How many of your guys have you lost?
I got a whole sleeve full of 'em right here. I don't even know. I lost 3 of my best friends though, but I lost a lot of people that's close to me. All due to violence.
Anthony, how many of you lost?
I lost 15 that I know for sure, but it's more than that of friends brothers that I lost.
So I've never been to Iraq or Afghanistan or a quote-unquote war zone, but our neighborhoods, unfortunately, the south and west sides of Chicago are war zones. And if our guys aren't given the chance to heal from trauma, and you heard about cognitive behavioral therapy, that's critically important to sort of take that next step. Third would be that I always think those closest to the problem are the solution. I don't see these guys as the problem. I see them as absolutely the solution. And that we got to listen to them, we got to empower them, we got to put them in positions to lead, and that without their leadership, we have no chance of winning this battle and changing. And honestly, I don't want to get emotional up here, I've just learned so much from Billy. And Billy was somebody, I didn't know him. I hated him all my life, just because of what had happened, but I didn't know him. And from the time I met him, I just saw one extraordinary leader and how compassionate, I just saw the essence of his humanity, how smart he was, how committed he was to doing something different. And that interaction when he was 16 lasted at most 5 minutes, and that changed everything, but that didn't define who he was. And what he said, 2 things, when his son was killed, because of who Billy is, we knew pretty much right away who that was. And Billy didn't have to take revenge himself or retaliate. People would have done that for him. And people calling and saying, do you want us to handle that? And what Billy said, I'll never forget this, is Billy said, if that young man came into our program, I would mentor him. I would take him under my wing because someone needed to be there for me. And I have 2 children, and I don't know if someone killed my son or daughter, whether I would have the humanity to bring them into our program. And so just the lessons and the wisdom that you can gain from this work, it's extraordinary.
This is phenomenal. And for everybody who's sitting in this audience, no matter what you do and why you're here at ASU+GSV, so I know there's educators, there's funders, there's ed tech folks, every one of us has a responsibility to engage with what we're hearing today. This isn't just, oh, this is the CRED program, that's what they're doing. Every one of us lives in communities where we can make a difference. The work that you're doing every day can make a difference. Southern New Hampshire University, I know they're here, right? The AA degrees that you all are getting, they're getting online. these are the folks that you're helping. And if you're not, you should be. So that's what I want you all to be taking away. But we have 1 minute left. So any parting words that we haven't covered, Billy?
The one thing I would say, if you're not willing to help, don't be so fast to judge.
Amen. All right. We good? Any other parting words? No? Good. Let's give a hand.